Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last breakout session for today. Our presenters for this session are Caroline Smith, the Inclusive Services Consultant, and Kristin White, the Director of the South Carolina Talking Book Series Services, both at the South Carolina State Library. And today they're going to be talking about inclusive and accessible libraries putting DEI into practice.
All right, thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so in this session, we'll talk about the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion and why they're important to put in practice in your library. And I will share an inclusive approach to better serve diverse populations. And then in the second part of the presentation, we'll share some resources that are available from the South Carolina State Library and Talking Book Services, and you'll have a chance to get an overview of the Talking Services program. So with that, I will go into our first slide. I'd like to start off with a little bit of self-reflection. So on the screen here, you see an identity wheel with some major categories of identity. And since it's fairly small, I'll go ahead and read those. They are race, community support, religion, sexuality, class, mental health, nationality or immigration status, age, education, gender, language, and physical ability. So lots of different areas, but it's certainly not an all-inclusive list of, things that may be important to your identity. But each of these areas can have a huge impact on how we operate in the world. So it can affect our own biases, how we see the world, our culture, how we interact with others, and then how we're treated by others and how others see us as well. So that's important as library employees because we have our own identities to be aware of, and we're also working with everyone across that spectrum. So I have a couple questions for you to just think about. You can type them in the chat if you're willing to share. But first, which identity do you think about the most as it pertains to you? Or which identity is most important to you? And I cannot see the chat, but Kristin, if you see any messages and would like to read them out, feel free to.
I will.
So that's which identity do you think about the most? And then which identity do you think other people think about when they see you?
Nothing in the chat yet, Caroline.
Yeah. And just to point out for that question about what other people think about, not all of these categories are visible. So there may be lots of areas that someone wouldn't know about you until they get to know you as a person.
Caroline, I do have a response. Megan responded, it's hard to pick one. I would say race and gender is what I think about or what she thinks about most.
Yeah. And then another question to think about is which identity do you think about the least? Are there some areas that you never tend to think about?
Maggie states that she thinks about mental health and physical ability the most.
Mm-hmm. I've also heard that it may depend on where you are in certain groups or whether you're at home or at work or things like that can make a big difference.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Kiana is saying same here, race and gender. Brady Cross says physical ability. M. Smith is saying gender or class, and F.S. Anderson is saying most equals race and gender. Linda says religion. Allie says gender and religion most, and Desiree says race and age. Okay.
And my last question is, how many of these identities did you choose or have control over? And you don't have to answer that one, but it's, it's probably not many. And even the ones that we do have some control over, maybe immigration status, we can choose to immigrate, but that's a very, difficult choice to make and a very extreme change, right? And so I wanted to start with this because many of these categories are tied to privilege or discrimination. And privilege means a set of unearned advantages or benefits given to people who fit in a specific social group. So as an example of that, I do not have a disability. So I have some privileges associated with that. I can walk into a building and not worry about whether I can physically access their services, whether I can use the restroom while I'm in the building, or whether people will treat me differently because they perceive that I have a disability. So that's a privilege. And then discrimination, on the other hand, is unfair treatment based on your identity. And the other thing I want to mention about the idea of identity before we move on is that all of these identities intersect or are intersectional. So we all have multiple identities represented here, and you may find that you have privilege in some areas and experience discrimination in others. You may find you have privilege in lots of different areas, or you might be marginalized in multiple ways that overlap. And that idea of intersectionality and the term was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw about 30 years ago to explain the experience of discrimination of Black women is distinct from experiences of white women or Black men because of the intersecting identities. And the reason that's important in libraries is that we want to include all of those intersections in every individual. So if an organization or a library has a push to become more diverse and reach one group, for example, maybe we want to start a program to reach LGBTQ youth. Well, we have to remember that that also includes people of all different races, religions, classes, abilities, um, and that complexity of identity. And sometimes even in attempts to be more diverse in our organizations to reach one underserved area, that can get ignored. Even in historical movements for civil rights in different areas, sometimes those intersections were left out and people felt excluded. So now I'd like to take a minute to talk about the letters in DEI. So that stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because these terms get used so often and it's not always clear what we mean by them. So here I have a definition from ALA's Office of Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services. Diversity can be defined as the sum of ways that people are both alike and different. The visible diversity are those attributes or characteristics that are external. However, diversity goes beyond the external to include internal characteristics that they define as invisible diversity. Invisible diversity includes characteristics and attributes that are not readily seen. When we recognize, value, and embrace diversity, we are recognizing, valuing, and embracing the uniqueness of each individual. So here's an example showing one way that a lack of diversity can affect us in libraries. There were two recent studies of diversity in children's books that were published in 2015, and then it was updated in 2018. And the biggest increase there was in books about animals or other. And again, this is including a lot of picture books that may be written with trucks or something like that as the main character. So we can compare these numbers to our demographics in our service population and see that they aren't equivalent. And in libraries, we talk about wanting to have books that are windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So that means if a child or an adult walks into the library, we want them to have access to all types of stories, stories they can see themselves in and that reflect their own identities, as well as stories that they can, have a glimpse into someone else's experience. And when our books are not diverse, it limits how effective we are as libraries at meeting that goal. And it could lead our customers to feel like they aren't included and they don't see themselves in our books. And just to point out, this graph is just focused on race and ethnicity, one type of diversity, but we also have lots of other areas that we can consider, as well as the intersections of those areas to include in our collections. And then moving on to inclusion. Inclusion means an environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, are valued for their distinctive skills, experiences, and perspectives, have equal access to resources and opportunities, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. And there's a great quote by Vernee Myers there to sum up what inclusion is about. So diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. So inclusion goes a step farther than diversity. You're meaningfully involved, not just present. And then the last letter, I do tend to go out of order there, but the E is for equity. And a short definition of equity could be giving everyone what they need to succeed. So you can see in that illustration that's frequently shared that the little child on the right was shorter and needed an extra box to see over the fence. But you may have some thoughts on what could be improved or what is wrong with that picture. And I will read the definition from ALA again about equity and then give you a chance to share your thoughts about what's wrong with this picture. So equity is not the same as formal equality. Formal equality implies sameness. Equity, on the other hand, assumes difference and takes difference into account to ensure a fair process and ultimately a fair or equitable outcome. Equity recognizes that some groups were and are disadvantaged in accessing educational and employment opportunities and are therefore underrepresented or marginalized in many organizations and institutions. The effects of that exclusion often linger systemically within policies, practices, and procedures. Equity, therefore, means increasing diversity by ameliorating conditions of disadvantaged groups. So what are your thoughts, if you'd like to share in the chat, what could be improved about this picture illustrating equity?
There are no comments in the chat yet.
I'll give you a second to think about it, whether you'd like to share it or not before I share my own 2 cents.
Maggie says you could always get rid of the fence. Brady Cross says the illustration sums up my thoughts very well. Ellie Levitt says there's a version of this photo with the fence gone too.
Yeah, I've seen lots of different versions of that. And so I would say that in this graphic, it looks like the two kids are kind of held back because they happen to be shorter. And in reality, what holds people back often is not a trait that's internal to them, like the height in that picture, but conditions around them, which could include discrimination or a lack of opportunity. So I would add that it's will make a bigger difference in the long term if we start to change that conversation. So instead of thinking, what extra support can I give that, short child that needs my help to see over the fence? Think about what root causes we can change and what larger changes we can make, at least within our realms of influence, so that that child eventually has the same advantages and opportunities as everyone else. And I would like to see the child in the stands with the rest of the crowd and not trying to peek over the fence. So why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important in your library? And how does it affect organizations? Why do you think these are values that we are talking about so much? Feel free to type your answers in the chat. And Kristin, you can interrupt me anytime if you see something you'd like to share. But these are a few things that I came up with. And I think it really comes down to our ability to achieve the mission and vision of the library. So if the library has a mission like to offer a bridge to educational opportunities or expand literacy and information access, well, does that mission apply to everyone? Is everyone included in it? And that's where diversity, equity, and inclusion comes in, and making those services equitable to every individual in our service population. It can also affect how we operate as organizations.
Brady Cross has added, everyone deserves a fair shot at success. We can and should provide the opportunity.
Yeah, and that's such a crucial part of almost all the mission statements and vision statements of libraries that I've seen. And then on the right here, I have some different ways that it can affect internally within the organization, because staff want to work in an inclusive environment as well. And so having that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion can create a stronger team with more diverse talent and a more effective organization as well. Were there any other comments in the chat before I move on? Okay. So here's an illustration of the different spheres of influence where we can put this into practice. So on the left, we have personal and professional development, which helps us to learn different perspectives, build an understanding of the history of racism and other types of inequity, and then how they impact our communities and our libraries. And I think that's where change begins, because as library employees, we're usually the ones that are driving the change and making decisions. Then systemic change and organizational change means looking at policies, procedures, and practices that affect the public and that affect library staff. So that's making sure that we don't stop at being diverse and are really inclusive. And this is also where the personal growth stage turns into action. And finally, this is an area where leadership is very important, especially formal leadership, because when we're talking about policy level changes, that has to happen at least with the support of formal leaders. And then finally, the public services and outcomes. That's really why we do the work that we do, so that we can better serve our population. And we want services that are equitable and include everyone. And then that again connects back to our mission and vision as organizations. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is a long-term and continual process. So unfortunately, I don't have a checklist and there's no finish line to share and say that we're done. But I do have an approach that I can share with you that is a way that I try to be more inclusive. And I think it can apply no matter what your role is in the library. So that all starts with building your own awareness and thinking about your own identity and the role that it plays, realizing that we all have blind spots and that we're working in a world and even a profession that often is not equitable and inclusive. And then building relationships. That's especially with people of different perspectives and different backgrounds, and that will help point out some of the ways that people aren't included. So for example, if we have a great service and it's available all through the state or all through the county, but we have never advertised it in Spanish and we've never advertised it with immigrant communities because we didn't have those relationships, well, we've left out a major part of our population. And what you learn during this relationship building stage can be really surprising. So over the years, I've learned things that made me see my own privilege, and sometimes something that seems small to me or that I've never even thought about could be the difference between someone feeling welcome and at home in the library, using the library, or deciding it's just not for them. So relationships are also important to make sure that whatever effort you're making resonates and meets a real need. And an example of that is if you've ever had a wonderful program on paper that you've planned out for what you think the community needs, but maybe there was no transportation, it was at the wrong time, or there was some other barrier, and then it just does not benefit that service population. Okay. Next, I listed educate yourself. And that's because even if you have great relationships, other people shouldn't bear that entire burden of educating us on ways that they maybe weren't included by the library. They shouldn't have to always find the solution for us. So that's a balance. Relationships and hearing direct feedback is important, but we also have to be aware that it can be an emotional labor when we ask someone who has been excluded or discriminated against in the past, maybe even by our own organization, to help us out in finding the solution. So in times when we are in the role of an ally, we have to take some responsibility for educating ourselves. But the good news is that there is a lot of information out there and a lot of training, and we will share some resources that you can use. And if you need some individual assistance in finding something, feel free to contact me anytime. And then I have audit your library. So that could be a formal audit if you're a director or you have a committee. It could also just be looking around and kind of taking stock of the things that are under your control in the library. So that could be looking at programs, services, policies, or procedures, looking at your physical space, your building, signage, and decorations, and how do you market your services. And based on all that you've learned, what stands out to you at that point? Are there service gaps? Do your policies exclude someone, or do they, maybe they don't technically exclude someone, but maybe certain people have a much harder time making use of the services? And then by the time you've done all that, you probably have a long laundry list of things to improve. And that's when you can start to take action. You might need to prioritize. You might find some areas that you can do right now and some that you can't, but you can even start small right where you are, and then keep the rest in mind as areas where you can have a long-term goal or where you can advocate for more changes. Okay, we're going to move into some resources that are available from the state library. Some of them are for libraries and library employees, and others are available to the general public. So the Inclusive Services Center, even though this room is not open to the public yet because of the pandemic, we do have a circulating collection that's available through SC Lens and through curbside pickup. And we have some alternative formats for materials like Braille and sensory books. One of the books in that photo is The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and it has Braille and printed text and tactile illustrations, so you can feel the illustrations. We have books with audio players embedded in the printed book, bilingual books, and we're adding some other languages besides Spanish and English. Lots of professional development materials for libraries serving diverse populations, and a few other areas too. The other
Caroline,
thing
W. Moore has asked in the chat, how does curbside pickup work? And maybe we should come back to that when we get to the question and answer section. I just wanted you to know.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And if we don't get to your questions, please contact us and we'll be glad to connect you with the right person. So we also have assistive technology in that room. And even though it's not open to you all right now, I wanted to point out that we have a Braille embosser. So if there are documents that you would like printed for your library in Braille, we can provide that to you and even send it to you through the mail. Another item that I'd like to point out on the next slide is our FM assistive listening system. This is for patrons who are hard of hearing, and when we are back one day to providing in-person events, it's a great way to allow someone to follow along with the speaker and cut out all the background noise so that they can hear what the speaker is saying. So we have that kit that libraries can borrow and use at their events. We also have lots of other circulating kits on our website that can be used for programming. Circulation is still restricted, but if there's a way for you to use that safely with your patrons, like maybe a virtual program, we'll still work with you case by case and see if we can get that kit to you until the circulation resumes back to our normal operations. Some other kits I'd like to point out is we have some bilingual storytime kits. They would be, useful for a virtual story time right now. And we have a new set of book club kits that are for library staff to read and discuss books about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also leadership and communication. And they can be used for adult patrons as well. Few other things on the State Library's website. We have email discussion groups. I manage a group devoted to diversity and inclusion in libraries. We have a group related to accessibility and a growing group that's about services to people who are incarcerated. And we also have events, continuing education programs on our calendar that you can sign up for, and almost all of those are free and virtual right now. And then finally, the last thing I'll share before I turn it over to Kristin is the Diversity and Inclusion Subject Guide. this is my catch-all for resources that I would recommend to libraries, and I'm constantly updating it and adding more things there. So please visit the guide if you'd like some good training and resources in these different areas. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristin to talk about Talking Book services.
Okay, there we are. Thank you, Caroline. So Caroline just talked about inclusive services, which is a fairly new service of the South Carolina State Library. Talking Books has been around in the State Library for probably about half a century now. It's been around much longer than that. It's been around so long that it used to circulate records, and that the technology from those records that were circulated pretty much gave rise to the recording industry and the record industry as it was once when records were king. So we've been around for a while. The National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled is a division of the Library of Congress. So our department answers to two agencies. We answer to the National Library Service, or NLS, and we answer to the South Carolina State Library. South Carolina State Library, excuse me. We have 10 staffers who work in the department, making sure that all the patrons who qualify for our program in the state of South Carolina receive library services through NLS guidelines. It's a free Braille and talking book library for people with temporary or permanent low vision, and that's something we try to emphasize to people. It can be a temporary or a permanent condition. Low vision blindness or physical disability that prevents them from reading or holding the printed page. There are talking book libraries throughout the country. In most states, almost all states actually. There are a couple of states that combine their services, but a lot of our network services work together on different initiatives and so forth. We circulate books, magazines in Braille or audio formats, and the books that need to be delivered to the patron are delivered by postage-free mail or are instantly downloadable through our program called BARG, which I will talk about in a minute. That's the one thing I want to emphasize to all the public librarians in particular around the state. There is never a charge associated with our program. If our folks lose their talking books or their talking book player, they are not assessed a fee. This is paid for through the federal government along with state funds as well. So Caroline, if we can go to the next slide. Okay. All right. So this is our logo for South Carolina Talking Books. To obtain services through us, individuals and institutions must submit an application form. Let me emphasize that part as well. Institutions can also get a talking book account. So nursing homes, schools that have young people who qualify under our program, say for instance on a class basis, they could qualify to be talking book patrons. But there's an application that has to be filled out, and it has to be completed by a certifying authority as well. So someone does need to certify that this condition exists. The certifiers can be medical doctors, optometrists, registered nurses, rehabilitation teachers, or licensed social workers. There are actually a few other categories that are on there. One category I want to emphasize today, however, is librarians. If you can actually view or have someone view for you that this person has a visual or physical impairment, librarians can be a certifying authority for a form. So if you have a patron who comes into your library in a wheelchair or comes into your library with a white cane, and you can see that that person is impaired, you can sign for that person. The one thing I need to let you all know, though, is that we also service people with reading disabilities and other organic cognitive disabilities, things like ADD, ADHD, autism, and so forth. Those things have to be certified by a medical doctor. We are actually in the middle of a pilot program right now with Texas and Pennsylvania, where we're hoping that the results of that program will render a ruling that says that a medical doctor does not have to sign for those folks with those other organic disorders, that a librarian or a social worker or someone else can sign for them. But for right now, if it is a reading disability that the person is trying to qualify for talking books under, they do have to have a medical doctor to sign for them. And once the application gets back to us, the applicant is contacted, or the contact person listed on the form is contacted. And Caroline, we can go to the next screen. All right, so once you actually become a Talking Books patron, we have 5 wonderful reader advisors, or 4 reader advisors and 1 reader advisor assistant, who will contact you, will send you a new reader packet. It will have information in there about how you can place your orders, and a booklet about the new releases. Talking Book Topics is what it's called, and so forth. But there are different ways you can contact us through phone, mail, fax, and yes, we do still accept faxes, email, or via the online catalog. On our online catalog on the South Carolina State Library's website, you can request a username and password. Your username, I think, is your email address, but you can request a username and password, and you can go online and place your requests, similar to most ILS systems that are out there now. If you can see the photo on the screen, on the left-hand side is our DS1 machine, the simple machine. On the right-hand side is a DA1 machine, the advanced machine. Advanced meaning it has more features on it in terms of fast forward and rewind and sleep and so forth. However, if you get the simple machine, the DS1 machine, we can send a remote control. And that remote control can be used to upgrade the simple machine. People who have had those machines for many years sometimes will get a remote control. Or if we're out of the DA1s, we may send a remote control automatically with the simples. You'll see also at the top of the screen a blue case. That is indeed the case that the Talking Book cartridges are sent in. On the right-hand side of the screen, in the bottom of the advanced machine, you will actually see a cartridge in the machine itself. All that is mailed to the patron free of charge. They use it and they send it back to us free of charge. There's a mailing card in that blue case. That mailing card is turned over to the other side that has our return address on it, postage already paid. Everything comes back to us postage free. So we make it as simple as possible for the patron to be able to use the program. Caroline, we can go to the next screen. All right, so there's the contact information, and actually the mailing address, fax information, and so forth. I'm not going to keep this screen up too long. If you would like that information, you can contact me afterwards, and I'd be more than happy to send it out to you. Again, we are hoping that public librarians understand that you can certify people with these visible disabilities. And then once you do that, all of this is out of your hands. You just get the application back to us. It can be mailed back to us postage free, or you can put it in the courier, send it back to us, and your patron is good to go. From that point forward, they are then our patron. You can move forward. And they can have multiple library accounts, that not with us. They can have a Talking Books account and then also an account with your local library. That one does not preclude the other. So BARD stands for Braille and Audio Reading Download. It's a web-based password protected service that provides access to thousands of audio and Braille books, magazines, and music scores available from NLS. Yes, you can download Braille for people who have refreshable braillers. If you are not familiar with refreshable braillers, I suggest that you go on YouTube and take a look at some of the videos. It's really a remarkable development where it's a small machine with pins that pop up. And as you all know, Braille is a series of bubbles. Those pins represent the bubbles, which represent letters and words. And so you can actually download files that will do whole documents, whole books worth of refreshable Braille or subject matter from our BARD program. The best way that I've found to explain BARD to people is that if you're familiar with Audible and those types of services, or Overdrive with a public library, it's pretty much that equivalent for our program. Another feature that's wonderful, if you're looking at the screen and you can see the screen, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's an iPad with BARD on it. The BARD screen is arranged the same way that our talking book machines are arranged. So people who have that muscle memory for where the different buttons are on the talking book machine will also have it on their iPad and can also kind of navigate it that way. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see a pad, you see an iPhone, and you see a Kindle. Various personal devices can take the BARD app. So it's not just on a pad. You can do it on your iPhone. You can do it on a number of devices. Kindle is the chosen personal device for BARD. But of course, iOS items also can use the app. And we have two of our reader advisors. One reader advisor, Allie Lovett, who's actually in this session right now, is our iOS specialist. And Diane Keatle is our Kindle specialist. So we have folks who can help troubleshoot those devices locally, but then we can also kind of make a referral to the national office if those questions kind of go above and beyond. So one of the wonderful features about BARD is that there is a version of BARD called BARD Express that you can get on a notebook or a laptop. And it will allow you to download multiple books from BARD onto a USB flash drive, and then you can plug the flash drive into a jack on the side of the talking book machine that we issue. And it can play multiple books. So your people don't even have to wait on cartridges. And that's what has kind of saved a lot of our patrons through the pandemic. Family members have been downloading books onto jump drives and giving them the jump drives. And you don't have to have one or the other. You can have BARD and the actual talking book machine and cartridges. And again, our reader advisors can help patrons and families kind of navigate through all that. We can go to the next screen. And BARD, again, is password protected. You do have to have, the username and password through us. So it's not like you can kind of hack it and figure out how to download something on your own. You do have to have the information to put on this main screen that you're looking at right now to be able to access those different books for download. And then the bottom left-hand side of this screen, that is a refreshable brailler that is hooked up to a phone that would download a BARD document to the refreshable brailler. You can go ahead and scroll on to the next page, Caroline. Okay, and then there's another photo of a refreshable brailler. We are also a conduit to the iBill program. There's an iBill machine that you can get, a device you can get. It's small, it's about the size of a garage door opener. And the visually impaired people will use it to identify different currency denominations. That program has, I think it's kind of on a hiatus right now because it's through the US Treasury. And of course, they were shut down during the pandemic, but we are a conduit to get people qualified for that. A lot of people now are using Seeing AI for those kinds of purposes, but that's another service that you can access through our department. Caroline, we can go to the next screen. And then the NLS program also has a music program. I can send you all a link. The link is actually on the screen right now, but there's a wonderful video on YouTube that will talk about the NLS music program, and you can get scores. It's not iTunes for visually impaired people. It is a very serious music program. There's music theory and, like I said, scores that are in Braille and other alternate formats for visually and physically impaired musicians. And the NLS Music Division at NLS at the Library of Congress offers a wonderful music program wherein they bring in impaired musicians to actually play concerts. And some of those videos are on YouTube as well. So if you get some time, go ahead and take a look and see some of those. Wonderful, wonderful programs. So we will move forward to the next slide. We have an assistive technology petting zoo. Allie Lovett is with us right now. And she is over the petting zoo. Our reader advisor assistant, Amber Sanders, assists her. And we will take that petting zoo around once we get back, to regular business, to public libraries around the state, showing them assistive technology that they can buy that will help make their current collection more accessible to visually and physically impaired people. We work closely with the University of South Carolina's Assistive Technology Program, and they have a lending component that maintains an exchange program where patrons and libraries actually can ask to borrow some of the equipment on a short-term basis just to see if it would make sense for them. A lot of times we see this equipment, people get really excited about it, and then when you try and take it back and use it in a practical manner, it doesn't work. There's another device that may work a little bit better. And a lot of these items are extremely pricey. So we can come out, do a quick demonstration at your staff day or something, an evening, maybe a board meeting or something like that. And then if you all are further interested in the equipment, you can borrow it from USC's Assistive Technology Program and put it to some practical use before you actually maybe ask your friends if they will purchase some of these items and so forth. We can go to the next screen, Caroline. And so some of the assistive technology is listed on the screen right now. There's the Sarah CE text-to-speech reader. That's on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, if you can see it. It's like an arm that has a camera on the top of it, and you can put, say for instance, an old archival quality book that you have in your library that is not suitable for digital duplication, or you all aren't able to afford digital duplication of it. If a visually impaired patron were to come in and want to use that, you could put it under that device and it would actually read the page for that patron. A lot of magnifiers are just really simple ways to help visually impaired people read some of your documents and some of your books that just aren't able to be reproduced or would be costly to reproduce, to allow other patrons to use them. We take the whole kit, or we can take a few things depending upon what it is that you're specifically interested in. And we can talk to you about what might work best for your collection. And then again, if you're not ready to purchase, you still have the option to call USC and get in touch with them and see if you can borrow some of this stuff. And they have a lot of the same things that we have in our kit as well. But we are very focused on trying to help the public libraries in the state of South Carolina, understand the options available to them so that they don't have to put a major investment in trying to make their existing collection more accessible. Caroline, we can go to the next slide. And so that is it for us. If you have any questions, again, my name is Kristin White. I'm the Director of Talking Book Services. I am reachable at krwhite@statelibrary.sc.gov. Either myself or one of the wonderful reader advisors will get back to you. Again, we have 5 of them: Allie Levitt, Diane Keetle, Naomi Brady, and Allie and Naomi are in this session right now, I think. Brenda Boyd, and our reader advisor assistant is Amber Sanders, and they look forward to building relationships with as many public library staff as possible around the state. We had a great interaction happen right before the pandemic with a staff member at the Aiken County Library who helped one of our patrons who was having a lot of problems getting Bard situated on his laptop. And he walked in and she took care of it, and she wasn't even really aware of our program. So that's a wonderful success story, but we'd like to build many more success stories with you all that involve us as well. We want to build relationships with you. So if you have any questions, I do see a few in the chat. And Caroline, maybe we should start, and I'll turn it over to you and then I can come back. Maybe we should start with the question about curbside pickup.
Sure, and I was trying to remember, did we have a video about curbside pickup?
We do have a video, and I think there's a link on the webpage for it.
I'll see if I can find that link and paste it in the chat for you.
Yeah.
But basically, our curbside is in our lobby. So we have staff there that pick up your books and your holds. And if you're not familiar with the state library, our stacks are closed to the public anyway. So it's actually not too terribly different from our normal operations where we send a staff member to get your books and then have it down for you at the main floor. But they will put it in the lobby for you so that you could, once you place it on hold and were notified that it came in, you could go in the lobby and pick it up. But I'll see if I can find that video.
Yeah. Naomi Brady, who is one of our reader advisors, did put a message in the chat for everyone. You may want to cut and paste it. If libraries would like a supply of talking book applications, please call us at 1-800-922-7818. And applications can also be downloaded from our website, which is adjacent and accessible. And there's a number of links actually to it on the South Carolina State Library's website. So I think Allie may have put a link to a YouTube video you all may be interested in. And then Naomi put the link to the curbside service Made Simple, which is curbside pickup, in the chat. So you may want to go ahead and follow both of those links or cut and paste them and follow them later. Thank you very much. I think that was Megan who said earlier. Yes, Megan Palmer who said earlier, love Talking Book Services so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Megan. And I see a hand clap from State Librarian Lisa Aiken, who is our big boss and who is very supportive of Talking Books. We really appreciate all of her support. So if anyone has any other questions about Talking Books, please contact us at any time. If you even think that you know someone who might qualify or an agency who might benefit and could possibly qualify, just give us a call. We'd be more than happy to kind of talk with you and kind of work through whether or not our program is appropriate for that person or that agency.
And I'll just add that in my role, I'm a consultant in the library development department. So my patrons are library employees and directors. So I always look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to contact me about any area of diversity and inclusion that you would like to talk about.
And I see Marie Davidson in the chat. Yes, I did say Aiken. Aiken's main library, actually. And I wish I had the employee's name, but she did a wonderful job. So thank you, Aiken, for thinking of us. And thank you again, Marie, for your kudos. We really appreciate it. Let me let you all know too, as a closing statement, basically. We get the question sometimes, what ages can qualify for Talking Books? It's my understanding in another state, the youngest child who has ever qualified for Talking Books was 2. There is really no age limit. We have patrons who are over 100 years old who have been patrons with us since Talking Books circulated records. Those who are very active and vital patrons with us love the service and stay with us for many, many years. They build rather intimate relationships, actually, with our reader advisors. And I can't say enough about how much they help people with just not only their leisure reading, but just kind of personal education types of titles and so forth. We have a book club. And I will end with the book club. Information on the Digital Friends Book Club is on the under the news tab on our webpage as well. Brenda Boyd, who is a reader advisor, is over that book club. She does a great job. I think their next meeting is the 30th of this month, and the book that they're reading and all that information is on that page as well. So our book club is open to all of our patrons. And again, we have, I think, last month, we had a 4-year-old native Spanish speaker to sign up for our program. And then we also last month had a conversation about a 103-year-old patron in our program who gave us a really good quote that I can't remember right now, but is still very vital and active with us. So we hope you can help us get more patrons, and we hope we can help you all with the patrons that you have who may want another option and may qualify for our option. So thank you all very much today for the opportunity. I will turn it over to Caroline for final remarks.
And I just wanted to thank you all as well for attending today, and please get in touch and let us know how we can support the work that you're doing in your library.
Thank you all. Have a good conference.
Bye.
Thank you, Caroline and Kristin, so much.